wish to speak by pressing the raise hand button on the participant list screen, the bottom right-hand side. Does everybody know where the raise hand button is?
I can't see that.
It's actually not in the bottom right-hand side on our screens. You'll have the participants box right in the middle at the bottom of your screen, folks. If you open that up, there'll be a raise hand option.
Okay. Got it.
Excellent. Thank you, Cheryl. Why do now I have this like bar on the other side there. Anyway, we'll deal with that later. Okay, any clerks will lower the hand when you've been recognized by the chair for your speaking opportunity. All meetings are recorded and streamed live to the city's YouTube channel. In the event that a connection or service interruption occurs that affects quorum of the committee, we may recess the committee meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. Does that make sense for everyone?
Yeah.
Awesome. There are no delegations for today's meeting. Just before we begin, I just want to welcome everybody back and how great it is to see everyone's faces again after a big hiatus. I have been so excited for this to see everybody. And Rochelle, I think you get to show yourself because you're our staff liaison to the committee, so you don't have to hide unless we have a question for you. Excellent. There we go. We get everybody. Thanks, Rochelle. I would like to reverse the items because 4.2 is actually more of the essence, and we'll hopefully have a few minutes to talk about 4.1. But if that's all right, I don't remember, am I supposed to ask for a motion for that, or am I okay just to do that as a chair?
That should be okay just to do that.
Perfect. We'll move straight to 4.2, Climate Change Emergency and Imperative Climate Action Plan. Rochelle. Welcome, Mark. Excellent. We are at item 4.2 already. You'll be impressed. 4 minutes in. Rochelle, it's all yours, except you're on mute. You need to unmute.
Thank you for reminding me about that as well. Okay, well, thanks so much, guys. I wanted to, connect with you after a long break and reconnect about the climate change emergency action items that were brought forward back in December. So I put together a couple slides to let you guys know what we've been working on and to get some input on our proposal here. So if you recall, back in December of 2019, a climate emergency was declared at the city of Brantford. And these were the action items that are listed here. I think the full declaration was attached as an appendix to the agenda for tonight's meeting. But these are just the action items that I copied here. So we can sort of just remember what it is that we were supposed to be working on. If you guys have questions at any point, please let me know. So just to go over sort of high level what these action items are that we're supposed to be working on. We were asked to work on a process to quantify and report on the climate change impacts from every matter coming before council. So every staff report that comes before council should look at quantifying its climate change impacts. Secondly, we should look at a reporting framework for quarterly updates on what our progress towards the climate emergency goals, which is the net zero emissions by 2050. Third is to develop a communications and engagement plan to talk about the climate emergency, the carbon reduction strategy, and the need to mobilize. Fourth is developing a methodology and tools that will be used to quantify the carbon emissions in every staff report. And then 5 and 6 are the resources required to develop that tool for quantifying emissions, and then the resources required for implementing the communications and engagement plan. So that's what we've been working on. We started working on this, just after this climate emergency got declared, and then, sort of we're going full steam for a few months, and then, everything got a little bit crazy, but been working on this in the background, and so ready to sort of show you what we've put together. Emma, could you go to the next slide, please? So yeah, this is just a high level overview. So we've developed a tool to be able to quantify emissions in each staff report. So what we've developed so far is a spreadsheet and we'll elaborate that on a little bit later on. But basically, we'll have a section within the staff report, if approved at council, to discuss climate and sustainability implications. So it will look at emissions metrics, so trying to measure the actual greenhouse gas emissions that will be produced from each report decision, and then some other sustainability metrics, and then just some general, like more qualitative discussion on each staff report about environmental sustainability and climate change topics. It's important to note that this information is for information only for council, and that there's no decision recommendations attached to this section at this time. We decided that was the best approach for now, and if that changes in the future, then we can have that conversation at a later date. But we wanted to, start with this as an information only process, and just start understanding what type of information is going to be available to us. So yeah, so if we're adding a section into the staff report template, I was proposing to call it climate and sustainability implications. We need to have a council resolution for that to happen, for that section to be added to the climate change, to the staff report template. But if you guys have other suggestions for the title for that section, I would be happy to hear them. If you think that it should include the word climate or not, if it should include other words, or if you have different opinions about what that should be called, please let me know. Next slide, please.
I think it's good.
So this is just a general timeline. Sorry, were there some questions?
The acronym as it stands is CASI, CASI, which is the plural of home in Spanish.
Oh, sort of nice. Okay, so the timeline for this is to bring this forward to council in November of this year. And if it gets approved, then we would be looking at implementing it a year from that date, so November 2021. And in that time period, during that year, we would be developing, sort of finalizing the tool. It is developed in some capacity now, but looking to develop that and turn it into more of a web-based tool. So it's a little bit more user-friendly. And then also developing some training documentation and working with staff to make sure that they are prepared for that November 2021 implementation date. We'd also be doing some testing of the tool, potentially on council reports, or potentially just in the background to make sure that that's working properly. We'd have to determine what's best there. And then have that up and running November 2021, so that every staff report that comes before council starting November 1st, 2021 has that section in there, the climate and sustainability implications, with some level of measurement to determine the emissions of that decision. Then for the next year, we'd be sort of, understanding how people are using this. I imagine there'll be some staff report or some staff support required to help the other staff that are putting the reports together to figure out how to use the tool and sort of help walk through some of these calculations. And then as part of the requirement, we would be issuing quarterly reports on how that previous quarter looked, what we like, the totals of emissions we've approved, some other information that comes out of those sections. So we'll have to sort of see what that looks like, what sort of information we're gathering. After we've done a full year of this process, we would review the tool. So that would be November 2022. See if it's serving our needs, and talk to staff, talk to council, talk to SPAC to make sure that everybody's happy with how it works and the information that it's producing. Any questions about that timeline? Okay, next slide, please. So this is the information that we're looking to gather. Once I started listing it out, I realized that it's a lot. But the tool, I'll show you a bit of what the tool looks like after this. But this is the information that we're hoping to gather. So on the quantitative side of things, we're looking at primarily understanding the emissions that are getting produced from whatever decision is in front of council. So some of the more like simple calculations will be like, if we're proposing to buy a new truck or a new bus or a, you know, building, putting in a new building, you can sort of easily calculate the fuel that will be used by that bus in a year. Or, you know, you can estimate the natural gas you needed to heat a building and the electricity consumption in a building. So trying to understand those emissions from that. Work travel, if people are going to conferences or other things of that nature, there's a tool in there to compare taking a car versus a train versus a plane versus, you know, a local bus or whatever the case may be. And then looking at some other metrics that aren't to do with GHG emissions, but we thought would be good to start sort of quantifying so that we can start comparing against future development. So if we're looking at a building, you know, what is its water intensity? How much water is it expected to use per square meter in this building compared to future buildings? To just understand, you know, if there's a high or low water demand, if people are, you know, putting in strategies to reduce water going forward. And then similarly with waste production, and then looking at stormwater impacts and tree canopy. So I know that some question has come up recently at council about what a particular decision had on overall tree canopy in the city. And so I thought that would be a good way to understand if people are adding or removing trees, and just sort of add in that next metric of like, what does that look like in the overall story of the city? And then we also left in a generic like other section. So like if there's something we haven't captured here, but, you know, seems important to put in here, there's sort of just a generic section where staff can add in their own calculations. And then on the qualitative side, if people want to add in some of the things that they've already looked at, so if there are energy reduction or water reduction tools that they've built in, or like strategies that they've built into their development, I want to make a space for them to talk about that so that we can see across the city what solutions different departments are doing, and, you know, we can start to replicate those ideas and you know, celebrate some things some work that's already going on in the city. And then to look at land use change. So that's a little bit of a complicated one at this stage, because we're trying to, eventually we'd like that to be more quantitative, but at this stage we don't necessarily have the numbers attached to the emissions, the average emissions per hectare of residential versus industrial versus commercial. So we want to try to develop that, you know, in the future. But at this stage, we want to sort of at least capture that, you know, this agricultural land is being changed to whatever the case is. So we can understand that land use change is happening. And then of course, climate adaptation. So if there are climate adaptation things that people are developing into their projects and plans, you know, there's probably a lot of work going on already to do with, you know, stormwater and wastewater and flooding mitigation and those sorts of things that, you know, just to start having that conversation and being aware that, you know, we need to start planning in a way that factors climate change in and adapting the way we develop and build the city. So that's a lot of stuff. You have a question?
I do on this, and I do have my hand up for general questions, but they can wait till the end. But can we go to the slide just before this one, please, Emma? Thanks. So I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around quantitative versus qualitative, because when I look at energy reduction or anything that says the word reduction, in my mind, I'm thinking that can be quantified, that can be a measurement. So can you explain how you just, land use change, I get that as qualitative. Can you help me understand how you divided one into quantitative and one into qualitative, please?
Sure. Yeah, so certainly energy will be captured in a quantitative way as well. And we want to, you know, measure the amount of electricity and the amount of fossil fuels used. And the qualitative side of this is more like talking about energy reduction strategies. So when they estimate the amount of energy and natural gas used, it will say, you know, it's going to be X, but it doesn't really tell us why it's X. And so if they've built energy reduction strategies into their plan for their building or their festival or whatever the case may be, then this is a way to sort of describe it in text, like what those strategies are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. Thank you. And that might answer some of the other questions I have at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, so so a lot of these sections do have like a bit of a text box after them to just say, you know, describe, you know, what you've done here and what you're, you know, just some space for people to sort of describe and qualify what they've done.
And if I can add in there, Rochelle, and correct me if I'm wrong anywhere, but a lot of the things that are on there are certainly quantitative as well, as you say, Cheryl. The challenge is actually being able to quantify them, and that's where we've run into some challenges, finding metrics that are unbiased to be able to do it, that are neutral, especially with land use change. We've done quite a bit of research into that to look for a metric, but everything is really city specific. So I think that's something where what we're going to look at long term is maybe doing a study locally in terms of what is the carbon impact on different land uses within the Brantford area specifically, but how we're going to do that so that it doesn't have a bias. We need to find a systematic way that is, you know, as Mark would approve, is scientifically reputable, as opposed to simply applying the bias of the person conducting the study. And similarly with waste reduction, it's really about the CO2 that's emitted from the waste, and we don't have figures on that right now, like in terms of what the waste is or a way to capture it. So a lot of those things are difficult to change or to quantify at the moment, but this provides us with the ability to build those things into the system so that people consider consider them in terms of the climate and sustainability impact of their project or their initiative. And as we're able to develop the ability to quantify them, we can add them to the quantified side as well.
Yeah, exactly. So certainly this tool has lots of room to change and evolve over time. And yeah, some of those things will be a little more complicated, and we can add those metrics in as we go.
If I can also add to the discussion at this point, I really want to express a lot of pride, and Rochelle has really done a lot of work putting this together. When we looked at what other municipalities have done, what you know, the clean air folks have done and so on, there's a lot of other calculators out there for municipalities. This is really a really good balance of keeping it simple while still providing very technical and very valuable, reliable information for the municipality. And this has been the result of a lot of work, mostly from Rochelle and a little bit of research from Anna and I, that is putting this together, which is just far and above better than anything else that's out there right now, I would say, even in its developmental stage.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Yeah, well, I hope that, you know, by other municipalities not using something as quantitative, it means that, you know, that it will still function. So I think it'll be really interesting once this gets up and running to see how people use it and if it is as simple as we hope it is. Okay, so next, sorry, Ken, did you have another?
Just to say, by comparison, the ones that are out there that do more stuff are like, you know, complex spreadsheets and whatever that require pages and pages of input. And what we've really done is boiled it down to a user-friendly approach to put it in to the extent that we can. And where we haven't been able to develop that, we're leaving it as qualitative for now, right? So being able to achieve that balance, I think, is really important and will ultimately be really useful for staff.
Okay, so Emma, if you skip to the next slide. So this is just like a bit of a screenshot of a bit of the spreadsheet that we've developed so far. So ultimately this will get turned into, we hope, like a web-based tool. So it's more user-friendly. You know, what spreadsheets can can look ugly and intimidating and can get, formulas can get messed up and whatnot. So we're talking about developing a web tool for this that would be accessible to staff only. But just to give you guys an idea of what we're looking at and how we're calculating this, here's just a few examples. The first three on the list: vehicle fuel, equipment fuel, and electricity. So how these would get calculated. So if someone was proposing to buy a new tractor or a new truck for their department, they could calculate the vehicle fuel by entering in the type of fuel that's attached to an emissions factor in the back end. So that would pull up that emissions factor. So that would change based on if you choose gasoline, electricity, diesel, natural gas, those sorts of things. And then you can enter in the fuel efficiency of the vehicle, if it's a, SUV versus a car, whatever it is, and that you can look up. So we can provide a link for people to look the fuel efficiency up of their make and model of their vehicle. Estimate the amount of kilometers you travel per year, and then there's a formula that would then calculate your emissions per year. We'd also like to add in a lifetime emissions number. So if the lifetime of that truck is estimated to be 10 years, then you would have an annual and then a lifetime emissions of that decision to buy that vehicle. So these are the first few, which are the more simple ones. I think some of these more complicated calculations, like if you get into the development of a new road or some of these more like community facing decisions, I think we'll have to look at those maybe case by case and sort of develop, try to think through how we can calculate emissions for that. So it's not always going to be as simple as, you run a truck this many kilometers a year and produce this many emissions, because it's impacting multiple people, multiple vehicles, different homes, different cars. So some of those more complicated ones are going to be more case by case, I think. Unless we decide, figure out how to calculate those, and then we can add them into the tool later on.
Cheryl had a question.
Thank you. So I love this. This is great, but I'm just listening to what you're saying now, Rochelle, on case by case. I mean, a lot of the things that come to council are things like subdivision agreements and, buildings, and there's very few things that are as simple as this. So do we just switch to more of the qualitative information at that point, just to get people used to thinking about it and knowing what they're looking at and putting that information in?
Yeah, I think certainly that is a part of it, is adding in that qualitative information. And I think, for that first year, I think there's going to need to be a lot of support from, the climate change officer or whatever support person is in place at that time, to just say, like, how can we think this through together? And it's going to be a little bit more complicated. And if that is too complicated to calculate the emissions, then qualitative is fine. Or, some cases, certainly it's going to be not applicable. There might be a decision that has nothing to do with emissions at all. And then that's fine as well. You can just say that this isn't particularly relevant.
And if I can say, in terms of the subdivision approach or whatever, I think that's where a lot of those qualitative things right now can also balance off with each other. Like, yes, we are taking a naturalized area and developing it into a, low density development, but we're also managing the stormwater with stormwater ponds and other green infrastructure features that are offsetting the impact of the development. And even initially, at least on a qualitative basis, you can see the impact on climate change and sustainability based on the development that's happening. Even if we don't have specific numbers to assign to it yet, there are still ways to consider those factors.
Yeah. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide. So this is just an image that Anna put together when we were talking about this. This is Anna made this months and months and months ago, so it doesn't necessarily reflect what we have in the calculator now, but just to give you an idea of like what it would end up looking like, it's going to be certainly more web-based and more user-friendly. So you can click on a particular, type of fuel or something that's relevant to you, and then there will be drop down menus, and so we need to still develop that. But
Can I just interject for 1 second, Rochelle? I just want to make sure I'm chairing the meeting properly because I saw Sujata put her hand up too, and I'm unclear just in terms of how we're managing the meeting of the difference between waving because we want to interject or raising the hand to be on the speaking list for when the presentation is over. Emma, can you provide any clarity on how I should be handling that?
I can. It's completely up to you. If we want to hold all questions until the end, that is typically how we've done it in the past. But if you want to allow for people to interrupt and ask questions as you go through, that's fine as well. And it's whatever you're comfortable with. If we want to do the raising of hands, as we only have 6 people here tonight, if you just want people to wave their hand at you, if that's easier, we can certainly do that as well.
I'm happy to practice our proper etiquette with everybody here.
Okay.
So if it's okay with the committee, I mean, I've got the list of participants up so I can see when you raise your hand. I thought that went on the screen, but I don't see it on the little pictures. Anyway, what I would propose as our etiquette is that if you want to be on the speakers list for the end of the presentation, please use the raise hand function. I will trust people to judiciously use the waving of their hands if you really need to interrupt and have a contextual question, which I'm just as guilty of as everybody else. Please do just wave and I'll recognize you and we can interject your contextual question. Does that make sense for everybody? Nods? Yeah. Okay. That's what we'll do. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, and I only have one more slide anyway, so if you can skip to the last slide, Emma, then we can go to questions. So the other part of this climate emergency declaration is to come up with a public engagement and communications plan. So the plan that we've put together so far is 3 parts. So having an online resources available to people. So we've got the climate action webpage as part of the city website. So to continue with updates on there, provide information to people through that avenue. And then to do more engagement online. So, you know, considering the situation we're in right now with COVID and I'm not sure how much longer this will last, we wanted to have some tools that allowed for, you know, the proper type of engagement. So this includes webinars, videos, surveys online. So I've been attending a lot of webinars in the last 7 months or so, but they're great. You know, you can do them from home and you can just learn some information and join and leave when you want to. So we could host those about, you know, tips for how people could, you know, make changes in their own lives or specific ways they could reduce waste or, you know, whatever we think of that's relevant to climate change. You know, we could partner with groups in the community to host these webinars, or SPAC members could host them, or, you know, we could do that in partnership, whatever we want to do. I think that would be really neat. And then similarly with videos where you just pre-record something about, I don't know, a tour of a neat facility or a particular project that we wanted to highlight, and then some surveys to get some feedback from people. And then events, when we're allowed to have events again, certainly looking at that in 2 ways. So having climate action events specifically, where we, you know, have specific things to talk about climate action specifically, and then just being at other events that exist. So like at Canada Day, have a climate action table and where we can share information with people that are already there. So making sure we're present at both of those things. And so I just wanted to, yeah, get some feedback from you guys and how you wanted to be involved in that. If you think we should have anything in addition to that, and yeah, open for questions, comments.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rochelle, for that. So we have 3 speakers on the list, Sujata, Anna, and Councillor Antosky. So if it's okay, we'll go in that order. So Sujata, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I had a question. What I heard from the quantitative and qualitative surveys that is going to be done. I might have heard wrong, but what I heard was that you're going to do the building heating, the electricity, whatever new people are going to install. And 1 second, my thing has gone off. My Zoom has gone off. I really can't see you guys, but can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay.
We can see you.
Okay, you can see me. I can't see you guys. Okay, so so what about the existing buildings? Like Brantford has a lot of old buildings, etc. Is there some way we could do like a building efficiency test or something to see, like even your own the city building also is old? Like how do you can you put in that also as part of that testing or survey, whatever you call it, you're doing?
Unfortunately, like this tool wouldn't really allow for that because it is just for staff reports. And so if there's a staff report that comes forward that is renovating or retrofitting an existing building, then 100% that could be included there. But there are going to be other tools. So at the same time as this climate change tool is coming forward in November, the corporate climate change action plan will also be coming forward. And that will outline tools for how we can improve emissions from existing buildings, new buildings, and all of the other tools that we're putting together for the corporation to reduce emissions.
Okay, so meaning you are actually gauging the emission from the older buildings now, right? As part of.
Yep. So that happens. We are monitoring those and measuring those. So that happens in the corporate energy management plan, and then also we've done an inventory of emissions in 2018. So that hasn't been posted online yet, but it should be posted along with the corporate climate change action plan. And then that will be up there.
I have just one more point. That is about, you said we get the emission factor as translated into the carbon imprint. So how are we showing that? How does an average person understand that this is the carbon emission, this is the emission factor, and this is how much the carbon imprint we are having as an individual or as an industry on Brantford?
Yeah, so it will show if you put in a particular fuel, then it will show the emissions factor. And I did want to make sure that that gets shown in the calculation so that people, when they're playing around with the tool, they can compare, gasoline versus diesel versus whatever else. So they can see what that difference is. And then that calculates out to a total. So say you have a truck that runs all year and that's 4 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent annually, understanding what that means in any real sense is another, Sujata Khan, is another question that we need to probably look at. Sorry, did we lose you there, Sujata?
I lost the audio for a little while.
If I can just add to that too, Sujata, this is when you look at the climate emergency declaration that Rochelle had at the first slide, this is a tool that right now is being piloted with staff and staff reports, but ultimately is being designed to be able to used by the committee. But it's project based. It's not an analysis of the city as it is today. It's about when we're going to make a change or when we're going to do something ultimately in the long run, whether it's community driven or staff driven, looking at what is the state now compared to what will the state be when that project or initiative or whatever is completed, and does it result in a net positive or a net negative amount of emissions for the city, so that council can know that. And we know that not everything is going to be net negative in emissions. There are going to be times when we're going to need to buy diesel trucks, but knowing that the diesel truck emits the 4 tons versus the hybrid truck would emit 3 tons or whatever is the importance of doing it, so that when we can use the lesser impact tool, it's there, even if it might be more expensive or whatever the case may be, right? So that's what the tool is ultimately designed for or intended for.
Got you.
So next on the list was Anna.
Yes, just something super quick, pretty simple. I was just going to propose to add in the word environmental into the title in the staff report of this section to have it read climate and environmental sustainability implications, just to kind of clear anything up, just in case anyone has any sort of misunderstanding going into that section. Just hopefully that sort of steers them in the correct direction, but definitely open for discussion if anyone else has any thoughts on that. But yeah.
I think that's a great suggestion, Anna, and very consistent with the discussion that was had around changing the name of the committee. So next, Cheryl.
Thank you, Chair. Emma, could you please bring up the first slide again for me to remind me some of my what I mean by some of my notes here. The first thing will be, Rochelle, you talked about needing a resolution that's going to need to go to council for this. So I'm thinking about timing, because I'm thinking we probably want to get that resolution approved by SPAC first. And Emma can wait. So we've got the notice of motion, we've got it going to our committee. And then Emma, does it have to be a notice of motion again coming from the committee to council, to committee of the whole?
Sorry about that. No, it doesn't.
So it can come directly from the committee to Cal?
Yes, through a task force report.
Right, okay.
Okay.
And Rochelle, you want this up and running, you want this approved by, was it November of this year?
Yes. Yep. So I think, yeah, the committee of the whole operations and admin meeting is usually early in the month. So like probably the, first week of November.
So probably a good time now to work on the resolution, I would think. If I guess that would be you and Ken and clerks, right, and Emma.
If I could clarify, so
Thanks.
the task force report, we have to pass the exact resolution as what we want the task force report to say. So we'd have to have another meeting and pass the task force report before we go to the Callaway meeting.
Right, we have to, yes, that's what I was saying. So we have to approve the exact resolution with SPAC, and then it can go to the correct Cal meeting.
Yes, that's correct.
Right, okay. I just wanted to make sure I had that correct. So if we can get that made up, and then obviously I'm happy to take that to council. So I think probably now is a good time to be looking at that, given the time frame and given how sporadic our agendas are still a little bit right now. I think we're getting a little bit more normal, right, Emma, in terms of our meetings?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Or we're just getting used to the not normalcy.
The not normal, I don't know. Yeah, our schedule has been a little bit messed up, and really it's been about, high priority items. So so if we can, the sooner we get it done, the better, because then we've got time to play with at the end if we're quick on it. Talking about using the tool, and we know that it's going to be a challenge with each department. Now, there's an internal committee that's been built for the climate action plan, correct?
Yes.
So will they be trained on this first, so that each of them in each committee can kind of be the point person to help teach the rest of staff?
That's one option. And so I wanted to have this meeting with SPAC tonight, and then I'm going to schedule a meeting with staff for middle of September to show them the tool and just make sure that everybody's comfortable with the metrics, and make sure that the metrics that we're proposing are measurable. And then we can talk about how we want to do that training. So I think probably what you're suggesting is the best approach, is to have a point person in each department that gets like very comfortable with the tool, and then can be that point person for their department, instead of having one person at the city that deals with everything.
Because you would be overwhelmed with all the projects, but at least you'd have department heads for this specific tool that could come to you, rather than every single person.
Yeah, and I think that's the better approach. And then there will be lots of training. We'll have that time to do that training. So.
And if I could just interject in terms of timeline, just to be clear with everybody, we're not starting training this November, because we're not going to have a tool yet this November, right? We just have between Anna, Rochelle, and I, we've roughed out the framework and made it so it's demonstrable, but it's going to be built over the next year and then tested over the next year before we can get to the point of being able to train people on it. Like, there's still a lot more development work to be done before we can get to the point of training anyone.
But we want to implement in 2021, right? November 21?
Correct. But
Okay,
that's why I'm saying, like, we're not at the training point yet.
Right. Okay. No, I just wondered how that was going to lay out, because we'll have a lot of staff that this will scare the heck out of, right? And so if we have you know, your climate action committee member that understands it and gets it and can boil it down to what makes sense to them in their specific niche of the city, I think that'll be helpful. And I think that we've touched on some of my other questions. So when we're talking about the qualitative stuff, and I totally get what your explanation, because some of it we just don't have the way to measure it yet. And you talked about a text box, so describe what they've done. Is that being presented as kind of an optional thing, or are we really telling them we want them to fill that piece out too? Because there's always going to be qualitative information if we want them to be thinking about the emissions.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't know. I think the whole thing's going to be optional, and I think staff are going to have to just try to fill in what's relevant to them. And I think that, yeah, there's going to be a learning curve, and I think we'll have to review those first, you know, like as we go through the reports, you know, understand, try to work with staff and say like, oh, this calculation looks a bit high or a bit low, or like you could have included this, this, and this, and just continue to provide that feedback as we get through that. So that will be also part of the training program, is to try to just say like, fill in as much as you can. If you have information that is relevant to the section, please include it, because it will help, you know, make, you know, provide information to council.
And if I can add to that, I think it'll be a learning curve for council as well, because ultimately the one holding the accountability on the report will be council, right? To say, you know, why did you consider this or not consider that or whatever. And I think if we take that gradual approach where both sides of the fence are learning together as they go, it will help everybody to have a good learning curve together.
Yeah, I think that's great. And last question, if I can, Mr. Chair. Is there a way, or maybe I'm being too ambitious, with all of this information that we're asking them to provide, one of the biggest problems we have, or I have at council, is not seeing a life cycle cost of things. And if we can take that information and ask them to look at the life cycle cost, I think for me, that's one of the biggest, that's the most decisive piece of information, really. And I know that other councillors have asked for that as well. So again, I know that that may fall more on the qualitative side, because a lot of the things that they're looking at can't be specifically quantified, but the fact that they are asked to look at it and consider it, I think particularly in our world at SPAC, our biggest fight is upfront costs versus life cycle cost. And I think that it's incumbent on us to start pushing that envelope a little bit, or a lot. Is that too ambitious, or can that come from us with this tool?
Like, it doesn't include it right now, but I think it could be a question that we just add. Maybe it is a qualitative statement that we just say, you know, discuss the life cycle costs of this proposal versus, you know, the alternative proposal, you know, something like that.
Or simply the upfront costs. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions for now. This is awesome. Thank you. I love the idea of a web-based tool and the simplification of it. So thank you guys for all your work on this. This is amazing.
So thank you, Cheryl. I don't see any other hands at the moment, so please raise your hands if you have more questions. I will ask mine for the moment. I would like to just pick up on the question that Cheryl just asked in terms of life cycle costing. I wonder whether or not this is the right tool to use to do it. I think I agree with you that it's absolutely imperative that council have that figure to consider, but to me that's a financial decision more than an environmental and climate and environmental sustainability question. It really is a financial sustainability question. So I would suggest that this may not be the right tool to introduce it in, but it might be something that a resolution could go forward to council, that in terms of the financial impact section, which is already in the mandatory staff report, that it include an element of life cycle costing, you know, where it's appropriate, that be provided to council. Would that make any sense? That
makes perfect sense. I'm on it. Thanks, Ken.
Awesome. the other question I had was with respect to the adding in of the sustainability, the climate and environmental sustainability section. Is the intention of the resolution that we're to look at that would come into effect in November 2021?
That was my intention, but we can explore that. We can have the section added earlier and then have the tool in effect. No, just do it all at once.
I agree, but I was just clarifying. I wasn't sure if that was the actual common thinking.
That was the idea, yes.
Yeah. And then in terms of the resolution as well, I don't know if have you had discussions with clerks about the impact of this, and has there been any feedback at this point about the challenges involved in adding this section?
I did speak to clerks, and they said that what's required is a resolution from council to add a section to the staff report template. So that was all that was required from that side of things.
So my question would be, how do we engage clerks, and without putting Emma on the spot at our meeting and in total unprepared fashion, but how do we engage clerks on really having a practical discussion so that as we're developing the motion, we're not creating a problem for staff that we're going to have to overcome in November, that we can identify and work with clerks and anywhere else that there would be resistance to address the legitimate concerns of staff in adding this section and sort of put those fires out before we get to the council table.
Yeah,
we can certainly work together before our next meeting. I think it would be best for it to come through the task force report. So it all comes at once and we can pass that through the task force report. But Rochelle and I can definitely speak to each other and figure that out beforehand.
Awesome. I want to be proactive in addressing, whatever concern staff has, not just be on a technical level that's the case and then find out later that we've missed something really important.
This is what clerks do all day long with counselors, just letting you know. They have to herd cats, and this is what they do all day long, helping us through it.
And I would like to be one of those cats for sure that gets herded. Okay, perfect. So in terms of next steps on that resolution, then is that on the sort of the Rochelle and Emma desk to come up with some appropriate language for that for the next meeting?
Yes, certainly we can do that. And then is that going to be enough time? So if you have a next meeting end of September, then that will get approved, and then that will be enough time to get it to the November Callaway meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, because then that still gives us a month between the two, so that should be fine.
Yes.
Sorry, is that building in time for notice of motion and approval at the task force?
Yes, so we actually don't need a notice of motion. The task force report can go directly to COA. And then,
sorry, yes, just as a report with the resolution attached to the report.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
We need a notice. We don't need a notice of motion here, right? We can just put the topic on the agenda for September.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then in the related side, the climate action report will be going to council in November as well. Is that correct, Rochelle?
That's correct. So, yep.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, yeah, at the next meeting, I can definitely give you guys an overview of what's included there, give you a presentation on what that looks like, and some more information on what this climate lens report looks like. I think the plan right now is for those to be packaged in one staff report, unless anybody thinks otherwise, because the climate lens tool that we're developing is certainly going to be a tool that we recommend in the corporate climate change action plan, because that's going to be an important piece of reducing emissions corporately. So
perfect. Thank you very much.
One and the same.
Okay. So that addresses my question. Last call if there's any questions on this. And then I would like to spend a few minutes. We have about 10 minutes left in our meeting tonight. I do want to have just a couple of minutes at the end to talk about our work plan, but the other question that Rochelle had asked for feedback on was SPAC input, and Rochelle had put some suggestions at the end of the presentation there. Was there any comments that anybody wanted to make in regard to how SPAC can be involved in supporting this initiative?
Well, I think that, you know, there was I think the 3-tier, the website, the online. I think that there's always ways for us to be involved, even if it's just us hosting stuff online. I guess it's just having a better understanding of what those pieces look like once they're developed. But certainly, especially with online stuff, anything you've got, you make sure that we get it so that we can share it out. And also the website, we've really got to be strategic, I think, about how we drive people to the pieces on the website so that gets a lot of activity. Because right now, I don't believe that some of the stuff is all that easy to find. So we kind of have to drive people there.
So one of the things that I was thinking about, certainly as we go forward, that would be an idea for SPAC would be if we could participate in the quarterly reporting, that we do, you know, kind of a panel with Rochelle, a committee member, yourself as the counselor or whatever, in discussing, you know, what the quarterly reports are. I think that would be an interesting ability to engage and have that voice there. I also think there's opportunities to highlight some of the climate action that we see coming through this, maybe do some location streaming or whatever, where we, you know, I'm thinking of, you know, the roving camera that you used to see on breakfast television. Maybe it's still there, I don't know, but, you know, they would go out and do live from some site. I think that being able to highlight initiatives like that, where we can, you know, I think really leverage the online forum to take people somewhere live, and do that would be an opportunity we didn't have before. I think more of these opportunities we're going to have to turn our minds to, because this sort of gets into the work plan. But, you know, most of our work plan was engaging in face-to-face engagement with the public, and we're going to have to, you know, at least for the next year, maybe 2 years at least, you know, reimagine that, you know, given the constraints that we have.
Mr. Chair, may I just bring up one quick point, and with your indulgence, it's kind of going back to the original thing. I'm just wondering if we can come up with, and I think Sujata was hitting at this point. So if we're saying X amount of reduction and nobody knows what that means, can we come up with a one-page template of this means whatever, the full electricity in 10 houses for a year, or whatever is some sort of suitable thing for us that aren't technical people that would understand what that savings looks like. And I think that would even be a helpful tool for staff when they're doing their calculations. They can also say that's equal to this.
Yeah, I think that that's a great idea, and it really helps to, like, yeah, be able to contextualize what, you know, 10 tons of carbon dioxide is, because it doesn't mean much to anybody, right? And then until we develop that understanding of how things compare to each other, we need to have an easy comparison right now. So we can work on that for sure.
Okay. Anything else with respect to this report? Well, seeing nobody waving at me or hands up, thank you very much for this, Rochelle. Rochelle, did you have any other questions, or were you seeking any other input from SPAC at this point?
No, I think I've taken up enough time for now. Thank you very much.
That was really the focus, and great work, Rochelle. Thank you so much. It is, I got to say, really inspiring. And are you leaving us? Oh,
I was doing a silent clap.
Oh, okay. No, you're like doing the queen. Okay, goodbye. Anyway, thank you. No, but I think, Rochelle, it's really inspiring to come back and see all the work that you've continued to do while everything's been on hiatus and through the pandemic, and really continuing to move this forward. And just awesome. On behalf of SPAC, like, huge applause and thank you for keeping this moving forward despite all the chaos that I know has been going on, and that our city staff have been doing amazing work in our community, and yourself included, to get the community through the COVID crisis and still moving this forward. It's just amazing to see. So thank you very, very much. So in the last few minutes that we have, I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview. When we last look, and normally in the fall, we do look at our annual work plan, but when we last looked at it, you know, we sort of had a section for Canada Day and Clean Brantford. We had a section for the Green ER Awards, Healthy Environment. We had a section for stormwater funding research and a section for climate action, all in sort of equal measure. And I think that would be around 15%. And then 40% was current issues and consultation for staff. I think that, you know, for the next year, we're really going to have to re-envision how we see SPAC achieving its mandate. And so I'd really like people to reflect on, and Emma, if you don't mind, if I can ask you to just email out to the committee the mandate, a copy of the mandate with this question, is that we really review the mandate, the updated mandate that we have, and come back to the next meeting prepared to discuss how we see SPAC engaging in that mandate in 2020, 2021. How are we going to deliver on that? How can we support council? How can we support staff? How can we support the community in achieving our mandate, given the restrictions that we have and the constraints with COVID? So does that make sense to everybody? Is that an acceptable homework task between now and next meeting? Are you okay to email that out?
Yes,
Emma?
I am.
Awesome.
Yep, I can do that.
So just really have a think about it, because I think we have to reimagine how we're going to deliver our mandate, which is going to be very different, at least for the next year or two, than what we had been working towards previously. Okay. Any last thoughts or comments? Oh, I got to go back to my great minutes. I got to do minutes before we lose quorum. Are there any errors or omissions from the minutes of February 2020? You're doing too many 20s in there. Anyone? Seeing none, can I get a mover and seconder to approve the minutes from our February 2020 meeting? Just love seeing that. Okay, I saw Jonathan and Cheryl. Oh, yeah. All right. Anyone opposed? Ha, seeing that, I can still do that here. All right, carried. There are no resolutions for today's meeting, no notices of motion for today's meeting. Any last thoughts or comments in the remaining 30 seconds? Seeing none, the meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Perfect timing.
Thanks,
I gotta dip
everyone.
out.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Anna. Thanks,
It's good
everybody.
seeing you all again. Bye, guys.
Good seeing you.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.